dark and gloomy swampland of the Black Morass, in the dead of night, a foul incantation could be heard upon the wind. So don't forget to like and subscribe and come, take a seat by the dark portal. Monsters in the swamp, terrible fearsome creatures with fangs and spikes. They would rip you apart as soon as look at you. These were the rumours that had begun to spread throughout the human kingdoms, dismissed by most as tall tales meant to scare the children. They had larger concerns. King Lane and Anduin Lothar had their own problems. Their once close friend Medivh had become more and more withdrawn, ever succumbing to the darkness that poisoned him from within. While they kept a watchful eye over him, neither man could have imagined the horrors he was about to unleash upon the world. Working in unison, a spell from Gul'dan, a spell from Medivh, they opened a doorway through the twisting nether that connected their two worlds. The Orcs had finished their genocidal rampage on their own, leaving scarce few survivors of other races. Many of them had to go into hiding. They were eager then to conquer a new one. The first warbands of the Horde began to make their moves toward Azeroth. But not all the Orcs were corrupted. Not all of the Orcs were willing to follow Gul'dan in his madness. Durotan, the chieftain of the Frostwolf Orcs, had refused to drink the demon blood, and he had grown suspicious of Gul'dan and the Shadow Council. He saw the truth behind their lies, that it was themselves and their evil magic that they wielded that had destroyed Draenor in the first place, that after taking this new world, his would only share the same fate. The Fel is death. Gul'dan was angered by this, but could not afford to kill such a popular Orc without impunity, as much as he wanted to. He instead was forced to banish the Frostwolves to the far reaches of this new world. It was a shaman of this clan named Drek'Thar that sensed for the first time the elements of this world, for how familiar they were. It reminded him now of all they had lost on Draenor. In this moment, he swore to never use the Fel again. He would devote his life to the elements. In response to this dedication, the elements guided him away from the humans and dwarves and other races, to a mountain region, to the Alterac Mountains, that were very much like their beloved Frostfire Ridge. After the Frostwolf force's departure, a few of the other clans followed and set up a base within the Black Morass. Slowly but surely they surveyed their surroundings and explored some of this alien world. The Bleeding Hollow clan were among the first to push west into the jungle lands of Stranglethorn Vale, but were immediately met by fierce resistance from the Gurubashi trolls. The other clans would engage in small skirmishes against the humans of Stormwind. These battles were often over quickly in shocking displays of brutality. They did, however, provide valuable information to both sides about what they were facing, although King Lane never could get an exact number on the magnitude of Orcs they were dealing with. A few short years passed, and by now, the Bleeding Hollow clan, under the orders of Warchief Blackhand, had to retreat from their invasion into Stranglethorn. Despite outnumbering the trolls greatly, they were outmaneuvered at every turn. The Gurubashi enacted a perfect display of guerrilla warfare. However, now that most of the clans had passed through the portal, Gul'dan believed it was time. By now, many skirmishes had taken place. Farms were burnt down, supply lines were seized, and the humans of Stormwind were facing the very real consequences of a ruined economy. However, they fought back hard. They would sometimes take down an entire Orc raiding party with no losses, making them an enemy unlike any other the Orcs had faced before. but the Horde still pressed their attack towards the capital. They would first set their sights on the beautiful Red Ridge Mountains to the east. Blackhand himself led this assault on the strategic location, but seemingly from nowhere, Lothar, with a company of knights, charged from the mountain pass, a wondrous ambush that completely caught the Orcs off guard, slaying almost every single one. Blackhand himself was almost slain in this engagement, but his life was saved, just barely, by 2 Shadow Council warlocks that accompanied him, their fell flames pushing the knights back. But he was shamed now. He executed the 2 warlocks that had only just saved his life, blaming them for not sensing the ambush. A few months later, he would send a much larger force to occupy the Red Ridge. As the Horde seized control of the strategic area, the Shadow Council would move their base of operations to the now Black Rock Mountain. They sensed the great power this site held and seized it immediately. However, one of Gul'dan's projects was about to come into play. A half-orc, half-Draenei, named Garona. Garona was not the only half-breed in the Horde, but she was the one that showed the most promise in the eyes of Gul'dan. She had a much more human resemblance. She was intelligent, and it was soon found out that she had a natural affinity for the blade. She would prove her skill with any weapon, given the chance. He had created for her then a set of daggers, imbued with the darkness of Sargeras. The blades would always hunger for more blood, to satiate its unending thirst, but it would also allow Gul'dan the means to control the mind of those who wielded them. During the initial years, Garona had learned the language from the humans that were taken prisoner, a skill that would prove most useful. She learned from these same prisoners about the Mage Guardian, the one who wiped out an entire troll army with a single spell, and would set out in search of this Karazhan. She was captured almost immediately by Medivh, and thought for sure she was dead. However, he saw Garona as more of a curiosity, over time befriending this prisoner, and revealing much to her, even earning her respect. It was here that Medivh's apprentice, a young wizard named Khadgar, first met Garona. At first he was outraged, consorting with the enemy, but he was soon chastised and told to treat her with respect. Khadgar would eventually warm up to her, believing her to not be the cruel monster he once previously assumed. The Horde required the full attention of everyone to combat. Even the clerics of the Northshire Abbey were seen for the first times entering combat on the front lines. Armed with a sword and their faith, they proved to be more formidable than anyone suspected. First siege of Stormwind began. The Orcs expected less resistance, but soon found themselves in a stalemate against the Bastion city. For the first time, their dark powers were not enough. Eventually, after some decisive maneuvering from the humans, the Orcs were in full retreat. It was in this retreat that Khadgar and Garona travelled to Stormwind City themselves. She was granted entry because Khadgar vouched for her, despite everyone's reservations. Garona saw her chance to be free of Gul'dan with these humans, and gave them as much information as she could about the workings of the Horde. And finally, her and Khadgar informed the king of something they had discovered, that it was Medivh in his madness that had granted the Horde entry in the first place. Lane refused to believe in this betrayal of his old friend. He was sure that with the Guardian's help and the might of Stormwind, they could prevail in this war. However, Lothar was torn. His instincts told him that Medivh was lost to them, but he did not want to betray his king. He did, however, in the end, follow his instincts. Khadgar, Lothar and Garona set out to stop the Guardian with heavy hearts, hoping that it would put a stop to this war if they could defeat him. Within the Tower of Karazhan, a terrible battle ensued. Reality was twisted in there from years of the struggle against Sargeras' dark spirit and the magic he could barely contain. But eventually all three, although visibly scarred and shaken from the encounter, would be able to slay the Guardian. This was the first Guardian to have died for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it would have devastating consequences. First, it turned out that Gul'dan had been seeing through Garona's eyes the entire time. When the final confrontation began, the cunning warlock used the opportunity to enter the Guardian's mind, to search for the location of the tomb. But when the Guardian fell, he too fell into a coma. Secondly, the dual spirits of the Guardian were freed. The pure and virtuous spirit of the true Medivh was banished and forced to wander the astral plane, while the twisted and tormented dark spirit unleashed a terrible curse on the tower and its surroundings as soon as it was purged. The area would come to be known as the Deadwind Pass, where nothing could ever grow, and the tower was so warped that all who entered never returned. Meanwhile, a significant birth had taken place up in those icy mountains of the Alterac. The Frostwolf chieftain Duratan and his wife Draka had bore a child and heir. They would, however, be confused why his skin had been green, and reached out to an old friend still in the Horde, Ogrim, a member of the Blackrock clan. While he could not provide the exact answer they sought, he inadvertently led Gul'dan's assassins right to the Frostwolves, who were murdered in cold blood, and their newborn infant left for dead. But the infant, in secret, was found by a human noble named Aedelus Blackmore, who kept the child. Ogrim was so enraged by his friend's death that once Gul'dan fell into the coma, he seized the opportunity to challenge Blackhand to Mat Gorar, a fight to the death, a sacred rite for the Orcs. He would smash in the skull of Blackhand with his infamous weapon, the Doomhammer, thus claiming his victory. The nameless child would be more important than anyone could imagine, and the two sides are standing on the precipice of victory. What happens next? We'll have to wait until a future episode. Thank you so much to everyone for all the support, for every like and subscribe, and don't forget to come back anytime.